What is up, Nuggets? It's your boy, Killer Pizza, here with a brand new video for you rascals and rapscallions out there. Now, for this one today, I don't have much of a format. To be honest, I just wanted to hop on here and talk about Phantasm for a little bit. As you guys know, if you watched my videos last week, I've been dealing with a bit of an injury. I strained a muscle in my patella, kind of like a runner's knee situation. I'm feeling a little better now. It's still a little achy. I'm still recovering. I got to wear a knee brace to work and whatnot, but I spent 4 days where I couldn't walk in my basement in the theater room just watching movies, and I couldn't get up to change the Blu-rays or anything, so I had to stream. So I went on Tubi, and they got a lot of great, fun, old horror flicks. You know, that's the shit I love, 70s, 80s, 90s. And they had all the Phantasm movies except for Part 2 because of licensing rights or whatnot. So I said, fuck it, I'm going to throw this on because I've never seen any of these movies in my life, besides the first one, but it was so long ago. I only vaguely remember chunks of the movie. So I threw on Phantasm 1, started watching it, and right away I was pleasantly surprised by how good it was. I figured it would be because, you know, if you're going to be mentioned with all these other legendary horror flicks like Phantasm is, you got to be good. But at the same time, Phantasm isn't one that's really held up there with like the horror icons, you know. Even like Pennywise and shit is held over Phantasm, which is kind of fucking dumb in my opinion. Because, I mean, there's only been 3 movies, 2 technically in a mini-doc, 1990, but I digress. Anyways, I threw on Part 1, and it was really fun, honestly. I thought the first part was a little bit slow, but it's just like an atmospheric movie with the little brother, Mike. He's investigating, like, the cemetery where they go to a funeral, him and his older brother, Jody, and Jody's friend, Reggie, who are the 3 main characters you're going to get used to in these 5 movies. Their friend died, so they go to the funeral, and Mike is kind of hanging out, thinking something's up with his funeral, and that's where we get introduced to the Tall Man, this creepy-ass old Undertaker, the original Undertaker. But it shows him just picking up this casket by himself and putting it into the back of the hearse and everything, which is suspicious. And Mike, the whole movie, is trying to convince his older brother Jody that something isn't right at this funeral home. He breaks in at one point and is investigating and checking everything out. And we get to the conclusion that this Tall Man is a supernatural being who is digging up bodies from the graveyard and taking these bodies, and he takes the brain out and puts it in these spear balls, these little spears, you've seen them before, that can kill people. So, and then taking the bodies and shrinking them down to size because of the gravity and sending them to another dimension to become slaves for him. Slaves for what? They never mention in 5 movies. But anyways, yeah, it turns the bodies into straight slaves, turns the brains into killers. So it's kind of a fun concept. And once Mike convinces Jody that this is really going on, and Reggie finds out therefore after, they go to try to take down the Tall Man, and it kind of becomes more of like an adventure fantasy kind of thing, which is kind of fun with these films because, like, I'm pretty much a straight-on horror guy. Like, slashers are my favorite subgenre, so I don't really go the sci-fi route very often. But I like that this kind of goes sci-fi fantasy through the entire series. But yeah, this movie, I don't want to give too much away. You should definitely check it out. But it ends on like this cliffhanger, you know, boy, you know, if you know, the Tall Man. But this movie was fucking crazy. It's like the weirdest thing. I talked to a good friend of mine, friend of the channel, Creature Feature John Campbell. He's a big fan of these movies. And I said, dude, I finally checked out Phantasm 1. This shit is crazy. He summed it up best. He says, it's great. You don't know what's real and what's not. That really is like a theme of this series, especially in the first one. Something I really loved about these is that, like, I couldn't tell what the fuck was a dream and what wasn't. But when other movies do that, I find myself just picking away at it. Like, I have to know what's real and what's not. And with this one, I did to an extent. But very easily, surprisingly, I found myself able just to let it go and say, I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the ride. And I feel when a movie can do that, which can have you on your toes thinking, but not so much that it ruins it for you, just where you can say, okay, fuck it, I'm not going to overthink this, which we all do about horror movies sometimes. How often have we been watching, like Phantasm? For the movie, I was going to come up with a different example, but Phantasm's the perfect example. I could say, well, how come this is that way and this is that way? And I'm like, dude, there's literally little dwarf monsters chasing people around and spears stabbing people in the head and sucking all their blood out, and I'm sitting here wondering about continuity. You know what I'm saying? That's the fun with horror. So many talking points to this shit, but unbelievable soundtrack in the original. That's something that goes with all 5 of these movies. The soundtrack is one of the best I've heard in any horror movie, and they change it up a little bit with the same kind of rhythmic tone and theme, but it's unbelievable, the score in every one of these movies. But I absolutely love the first one. And we'll move on to the second, which I checked out, which I will say, I picked this up at Bucket of Blood Records in Chicago, Illinois. That is the Phantasm 1 and 2 set. Now, I heard a lot of bad things about this set. This is, once I finally made it upstairs, I threw on part 2. It ended up binging the rest of them. I heard for the longest time this release was garbage. And, you know, the slip is good. It has a pretty dope poster inside, which is this artwork and then the original on the back. I will say, this is a really shitty Blu-ray release. I would not suggest picking this up. The audio was completely fucked on the second one. I couldn't hear anything. So, to the point I had to switch to something I've had for a while, the 5-disc collection. I've had this for years and never checked these movies out. I had to watch the rest of these on DVD over the Blu-ray, at least the second one, and it was worth it, you know. Definitely worth it on the DVD set. On a side note, I would love to upgrade and get that Arrow video release, I think, but I mean, I just watched them. I'm pretty cool with this DVD for now. But anyways, the second movie came out, I believe, 9 years later, and this is kind of where we establish Reggie, the best friend of Jody, who Jody passes away at the end of the first, just for context, kind of becomes the lead. And this one picks up right where the first one left off. And we have a new actor that plays Mike for the only time in the series. After this, the original actor comes back for 3, 4, and 5. But this is kind of interesting because 2 and 3 kind of have a similar tone, which you don't see very often. A lot of times horror movies are about survival, where this is like, they're like, we're going to go after the tall man and get him, pretty much. That's the entire plot of the second movie. Reggie and Mike meet up. They go to a fucking gun store, a hardware store, and they load up on all these weapons, and they go after the tall man, which this kind of takes more of a tone of like an action-adventure film than horror, which I'm cool with it. This is arguably better than the first movie. I'm kind of going back and forth with it. I would say the first is my favorite at this point, but this was a lot of fun. It really feels like a ripoff from a lot of other movies, if I'm being quite honest. There's a lot of like dream sequence stuff where we get more into like the abilities and supernatural powers of the tall man, which really remind me of A Nightmare on Elm Street. This really reminds me of Dusk Till Dawn sometimes. I think the best, or Evil Dead is a really good reference where when they load up with this shit, they even got a chainsaw where we introduce like Reggie's version of the boomstick, which is a reoccurring thing in the rest of the series, which is pretty cool. It's a quadruple barrel shotgun. He puts 2 double barrels together, which is pretty cool. I've never seen that before. There's a lot of fun stuff like that. But I think the best way to describe this movie is Phantasm 2 is to Phantasm 1 what Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is to Texas Chainsaw Massacre the original. I think that's the best way to describe it. And actually, both of these movies, both the originals and both the sequels, kind of came out around the same time, which never thought about that before. That's kind of funny because Texas Chainsaw 73, Phantasm 78, 79, then both came out around 85, 86 for the sequels. But this one was a lot of fun. I did like the actor that played Mike. I didn't like him at first, but after watching the rest of the series, I kind of prefer him. This shit is just all over the place, batshit crazy, gets fucking nuts. A lot of fun. I highly suggest checking this one out. I think I like 2 and 3 a lot because the comedic elements and everything, it's a lot of fun. So, anyways, we move on to part 3, which it picks up right after part 2, which that's a fun thing about these films. For the most part, they all pick up exactly where the last one ended. And they do a pretty good job of, you know, with the makeup on Reggie, because I believe he was in his mid-30s in the first one in 79, and, you know, they do good with the makeup and the hair dye to make him look, you know, how he did in the one before to the flashback scenes. But this is kind of the same as the second in a way, besides Mike, I believe, was kidnapped at the end of part 2. So Reggie is on another adventure to go find his friend, where he ends up showing up at this house. It's like pretty much like Home Alone. These thugs go in there to raid the house, and this little kid has all these booby traps set up for him. It's like an R-rated Home Alone. The kid's got like razor blades attached to a frisbee. He's got all like the paint bucket pendulum, but it's like spikes in it and everything. He kills off all these intruders and ends up getting Reggie out of this trunk that the guys put him in. I love the line where he's like, "How do I know you're not one of them?" He goes, "Because I'm in the fucking trunk," which that's funny. And so him and the little kid meet up together. He tries to ditch the little kid, but eventually they end up riding together. They pick up this chick along the way, going back to the old town where the Tall Man was, which through all these sequels, the Tall Man has taken over all these old towns and made them into ghost towns and whatnot. So one of the girls, after the other gets killed, meets up with Reggie and the little kid. So that's kind of our crew. And the third one kind of turns into like a buddy road trip movie, which, like I was saying, that's why I like part 2 and 3 a lot. They're really funny. And Reggie is a complete ladies' man in all these movies, which is really funny, just this bald dude. But there's also a recurring thing that he's always trying to get laid in every movie, which is pretty funny. But yeah, we have this trio, and I know a lot of people say the little kid's annoying, and part 3 is one of the worst, but I loved part 3. I thought it was a lot of fun. Them working to go find Mike, which they eventually find him and have another showdown with the Tall Man, which every one of these movies, like I said, end on a cliffhanger and pick up right where it left off, which is a lot of fun. With the Tall Man ripping people out of windows and through doors at the end of every movie. That's really fun. Something I noticed about this franchise as I watch these, which they're written and directed by the same guy. There's a different director for the 5th. Who's the director on this? Should give that son of a bitch some credit. Don Casarelli. Yeah, he wrote and directed the first 4 and wrote 5. But something I noticed through this franchise is, man, they sure love jumping through glass windows or out windows of cars and buildings exploding. That's like a common thread in these movies, which I'm down with it. But yeah, this third one ends kind of weird. There's like an element where Jody is like alive in one of these spears, and he's like talking to them the whole time. So they kind of bring the spear with him, and he's like showing up because this movie starts like this franchise. They start intertwining into these different dimensions and everything. So like like I said, you don't know what's real or not. It gets to the point from part 3 on where Jody comes back so many times, where it's like in fantasy, it's like, man, death wouldn't even be that bad losing a loved one if you could just like close your eyes and then you're next to him talking to him consciously, not just like a dream. But I digress. It's still a pretty fun element of the movie. But anyways, we'll move on to part 4. Part 4 is one that they say in reviews I've read that is better than part 3. I disagree. I think these are ranked pretty boringly to me. It legit just goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could put 2 in place of 1 depending on the mood. But yeah, 4 was okay. It kind of went back to the same tone as the original, which I can respect. Less comedy, a little more like atmospheric and eerie. And we do get a backstory of the Tall Man, kind of explaining, like going into the past and explaining why he became what he became, which is a lot of fun to it. But this one was just okay. I don't really have much to say. I'm trying to think if there's anything I'm leaving out. Like, I don't want to say too much. I had absolutely no plans making this video. Or what I was going to say, I was just going to rant on and on as I tend to do. But 4 was just okay, in my opinion. It was fun, but when you compare, like, how good the original was and the fun and the budget, for that matter, of 2 and 3, it's hard to really put 4 up there. I like what they were trying to do, and I love that they always use the same actors besides part 2 with Mike. I really like the continuity of that. They, as far off as all this shit is, they do really keep consistency with the story, and they add other elements. Like, it helped that I binge watched them all, because maybe if you haven't seen certain ones here or there, you might not pick up on certain things they're talking about. But I will say that too, this is a pretty fun franchise to binge. But anyways, let's go on to part 5, Ravager. So this is the last one I watched last weekend. I watched it Saturday morning. Now, this is definitely fan service. I think this movie might be different if you watch these movies over the years, like your whole life. You started watching them when they came out, because this was service to the fans. Like, they tie a lot of things up. But for me, if I'm being quite honest, part 5 was almost unwatchable for me. It was a struggle to get through this movie. And it was one of the most depressing movies I've seen. They cut to Reggie, like, coming out of the desert, and then he, like, switches to another scene. You don't know if it's, like, reality or not, but he's at this hospital all old, and, like, nobody wants to see their heroes get old. It happens, But, Reggie, like, shows up in this wheelchair, and Mike's talking to him, and this whole movie is themed with them telling stories about what they've seen with the Tall Man and people not believing him. And he tells the story to Mike, and Mike goes, "That's not true, man. I like your story. It's fun and all, but they diagnose you with dementia. None of it's true. So you don't know if he is just crazy or not," which that's really fucking depressing. Like, who wants to see a movie about one of your heroes having dementia and in a wheelchair and everything? And we cut back and forth to scenes of him in this, like, battlefield. Like, the whole world is taken over by the Tall Man, and they're in this war zone. It's cool to see Mike in this sequence, like with big machine guns and being a badass for once, because he is kind of a pussy in a lot of these movies. Besides the first, I guess he's kind of a pussy in that one too. But that's kind of fun, I guess. But there's not really much redeeming qualities about this film. Like I said, if I was a longtime fan, I might have found it to be better or different, but just wasn't for me. I would still suggest watching it if you watch all these movies to binge it. It's definitely has its place in the series. And I know they couldn't really do much more after this. The tall man wasn't in it much. He was very old at this point, but still cool to give like a final hoorah, and they have closure to the story and everything, which is all fine and dandy and everything. But anyways, it was just okay. But my thoughts with this series is it was a lot of fucking fun from start to finish. It changes up enough, but stays the same. And even when it stays the same, the storyline is so out there that it always has you kind of guessing. And it has a certain tone to it. Every film has different qualities to their tone. Like, though the second and third are more adventure, it still has a fun, like, vibe to it, if that makes sense. And the acting is great in this, you know, like, for the characters it is. Like, it's not the best acting, but they're endearing, you know, like, Reggie becomes a full-blown action star through these movies, and you end up really rooting for the guy, and I think maybe that's what took me out of the fifth one so much, that I just learned to care about Reggie so much. But, yeah, everybody's great in this. I do wish, like, if they were going to keep Jody in there, it would have been cool just to not have him come back as a spear and just be alive and not kill him off in the first, but I guess they didn't really have many options. And at the same time, I enjoyed these movies for what they were, so I wouldn't necessarily change anything. But, yeah, very fun, very out there. These movies aren't like anything else you'll ever see. The soundtrack is unbelievable. They get pretty gory. I would say the second and third movie are pretty fucking gory. There's actually some body horror in these movies, too. They'll really keep you guessing. Like, the tall man resurrects zombies and shit in these movies. These little creatures, plus the spears killing people. The spears do get a little old come the fourth and fifth. Like, how many ways can you kill somebody with a spear? But they're iconic and everything. Either way, I really enjoyed these movies. I'm glad I finally checked them out. I want to upgrade to the Arrow release, but, you know, I just got done watching these. I don't like double dipping too much, so I will have to wait until I see a better deal on it or maybe a new release before I pick that up. But let me know what you guys think of Phantasm. I know I'm forgetting something I want to mention because there's just so much to talk about with these movies. And if you want to, you know, talk about this, I fucking love it when you guys get in the comments and start talking with me, man. I had somebody say, like, thanks for the reply to me the other day, and it's like, dude, no fucking problem at all. That's all I ever wanted from this channel. Because, you know, like I mentioned before, like, I can't just go to my job or, like, go hang out with some of my best friends and just go on a tangent about, like, Phantasm. Like, we could get talking about Scream 6 or, you know, Evil Dead Rise or, you know, when the It movies came out, something a little more mainstream. Like, if, you know, motherfuckers probably seen Megan before they seen some of the classics. And I'm one of them that never seen some of the classics, Phantasm. But my point is, I can't just sit there and talk someone's ear off about Phantasm. That's why I made this channel, just to rant about horror. And when you guys get in the comments and interact with me and talk with me, it's fucking dope, man. You guys have given me some really great suggestions for movies. And I've been cool over all these years, so thanks a lot for checking this out. I've been talking about Phantasm for almost 20 minutes now, and you know what? I wouldn't have it any other way, goddammit. But with that being said, hopefully everybody's having a great weekend. Things to expect. I have a new package. I got pretty good responses from the Fat Records vinyl collection. I've been trying to collect all the NoFX vinyls, and I have a package of like 8 vinyls coming Friday, so I'll probably do an unboxing for that Saturday, and I have a pretty fun video for Sunday. I don't want to give it away, but I'll give you a clue. Dirty money or dirty butter. That's my clue. Tabata Vision. I got a video for you. But anyways, hopefully everybody's having a great weekend. Leave me some suggestions in the comments, all that fun stuff. Let me know what you think of these movies. Let me know if you got any suggestions, anything you think I would like based off what I rambled on about these films. Other than that, hopefully everybody's having a good one. Blood, guts, gore. I will check you guys next time.